Okay, so we just start by removing the lower 10mm bolt that holds on the bottom of the air cleaner. This will allow us to get to the carburetor for easier access and removal. And once you get that bolt off, you'll be able to pinch the spring clip that holds the boot onto the carburetor and work the air cleaner housing back off to the rear and pull it through the frame for removal. And now we continue by removing the rest of the stuff connected to the carburetor. So on the top there's a Phillips head screw that holds on the throttle slide and the choke, and then on the side there's a Phillips head as well to hold the intake side to the inlet pipe. You just loosen that one, no need for removal. Just pop off the top spring section with the throttle slide and the choke. And of course for the fuel hose, just pinch the spring clip, slide it up so you can get the hose off the carburetor. Make sure your fuel valve is shut off as well, or else fuel will come out, and you just kind of work that off the top to remove that. Next thing to remove is going to be the oil feed line. This is for the oil injection coming from the oil pump on the other side. Just slide that sleeve back, and this is just a press fitting. There's no screws or threads, so you just grab a needle nose or something similar and kind of work it loose and pull it right out of there. So now everything's been removed from the carburetor for the most part. You can twist it and slide it right off the inlet pipe. So now that we have the carburetor on the bench, we can start disassembling it. I usually start off by removing the 4 bolts that are holding the float bowl on. These are just simple Phillips head screws, and you can crack them loose and kind of back them out fairly easily. And once you get those out, you can pull the float bowl away from the main body of the carburetor. And once the float bowl is removed, you have access to everything inside. First thing I grab is the pin that the float hinges on. Slide that out with some needle nose pliers. And once it's removed, you can easily lift the float out of the way. With the float out of the way, you can access your jet now. The large jet is easily removed with a flat bladed screwdriver. Then you can unthread it out and set it aside. Now we can access the smaller jet that is down in a recess, so you have to use the appropriate sized flat bladed screwdriver. And this one usually is a little bit harder, a little bit set in more, and more difficult to remove. As you can see here, kind of have to unthread it out a little bit and just try to knock it out of there. So I have a tool that I got off Amazon for cleaning carburetors, and it comes with an assortment of different gauge wire, in a sense, that you can use to poke through the jets and make sure that there's no obstructions in them. You can also do this with wire, stranded wire that you find, or paper clips. It all depends on how big the size of the jets are. However, the Pee Wee jets are really, really small, so you're going to need a super thin wire. So it's probably easier just to pick up a tool like this. I'll put a link down in the description to where I got it off Amazon, and it'll make your life a lot easier. Essentially, you just want to poke that through the jets. Just make sure they're clear and there's no obstructions to them. So what's in the case are an assortment of mainjets for the PW50. Got these from Pee Wee's Only, I believe. Put a link down in the description as well. So what we're trying to do is squeeze a little bit more power out of the Pee Wee. So we're going to try to use a bigger jet or a more optimized jet for more fuel. So we chose our jet size, and I just dropped in the idle jet, which is the same size. There's no reason to upsize that. So I just used a new one and dropped it in there. We tighten that up very gently, as it's kind of fragile and could break. And then we just screw in the new main jet in the main jet spot, and that's pretty self-explanatory. Just make sure that you're not cross-threading it when you're reinstalling it. And moving back to reinstalling the float, you see there's a little pin hanging off of that. That's to stop the flow of fuel from filling the bowl. So make sure that goes on the right way, and then we just slide the pin back through to secure the float to its hinge, and that will kind of complete the bottom half of the carburetor. So now it goes without saying that if you're cleaning the carburetor, then you'd take all these components off just like I did. You'd clean them real thoroughly. I would suggest using a carburetor cleaning spray. One of my favorites is the Hilo Concepts 716 spray, and I'll link to that in the description. Or if you're just kind of going up to the local auto parts store, brake cleaner works really well on small carburetors. You can also get away with a gum out sort of cleaner too. But however you're doing your job, just make sure that you clean all the components before putting them back in. I did not highlight the cleaning process of this, and it might have looked like there was some residue on the bottom of the float ball, but rest assured the carburetor was in good working order before, and I cleaned up anything I needed to. But the main goal of the project here was to replace the main jet. So of course with that we didn't need to clean the jets because they were new. However, I highlighted the process of how to clean the jet if you needed to. But just keep in mind, make sure everything that goes back in is super clean, as it's very critical on the PW carburetor that everything be clean because those jets are so small. So now we're going to reinstall the carburetor onto the bike. So I started by cleaning the inlet pipe of dirt. Don't want the dirt and dust to get into the motor past the carburetor. So once you have that cleaned off, you can then slide the carburetor back on. And this is the reverse of the removal. So you're basically just putting everything back together. Pretty simple. Nothing to really remember here. Nothing really to point out, except just be careful as you're putting it back together. And since the carburetor can be clocked when it's on the inlet pipe, I just make a good effort to make sure that the angle of the carburetor is straight. Like you want the throttle slides pointing up at 12 o'clock, just to make sure that you're not adjusting the level of the fuel in the float ball. It's kind of a little trick from racing. So now we're going to reinstall the throttle slide. I usually put a little bit of oil on there. Two-stroke oil would work if you don't have anything laying around. And just make sure that the notch in that throttle slide assembly is pointing towards a U, or towards the left side of the bike, as that's where the idle adjustment screw will be. And then you just slide the choke in as well, and then close the top. And then we reinstall the Phillips head bolt that goes on top of the throttle slide assembly. This will hold everything tight. Just make sure you don't cross thread that. It could be easy. The angle of the screwdriver is not as simple as it seems because the frame rail is there, so you kind of have to angle the carburetor a little bit to get a better shot at it. And it's pretty straightforward. Just tighten it to where it's snug, and then we move to the side to the inlet pipe, tighten that, and remember this is where I like to have the angle correct. So here you can see I'm readjusting the angle of the carburetor to get a better shot at the top of that. And then when you readjust it, just make sure it's close to 12 o'clock so you don't alter the fuel level in your bowl, which will make the height of the float go one way or the other, and that could affect things. That's more of a go-kart racing thing and car racing thing, but could affect a dirt bike, I assume. So then we're going to reinstall the fuel line here. This is a simple hose, just goes over the fuel inlet pipe there, and reattach the spring clamp down to where that fuel hose can't come loose. It's a pretty tight fit, so I don't think it will anyways. It's a pretty weak spring, so I don't think it's holding much on, but it's doubtful that the fuel line will come off. Then we just reinsert the press fitting for the oil feed line, and that's kind of a tight routing down there. I like to route it around the bottom there. As you can see, this is sometimes a little worrisome, to me at least, that it can pull out so easy, but I've never had a problem with it pulling out. So sometimes I'll take a screwdriver and tap it in there a little bit just to make sure it's tight. Okay, so now we're going to put the air cleaner housing back on. I find it easiest to go through the back, through the frame rails and the shock. And we're going to go ahead and just slip this right over the inlet side of the carburetor. And one thing to watch out for is just make sure that it doesn't unattach itself from the air cleaner housing side. There's locating tabs on there though to help you. And the final assembly step is going to be to reinsert the bolt that holds the air cleaner down. And I don't think this is the original bolt from the PW. I upgraded this bolt to 10 millimeter to make it easier for me when I was at the track. I believe it might be a Phillips head originally, so that I didn't like that. So the 10 millimeter bolt works better. But you can see how loose the air cleaner is from that rubber housing up front there. So typically it might be worth it to get this reattached, and then you can ensure that that rubber boot that goes to the inlet side of the carburetor is properly attached as well. And then after you tighten this up, and that's it, you can reinstall the seat and fenders and your project will be done. So I hope this video was useful for you. I have some other how-to videos on the PW. Be sure to check them out. Thanks for watching. I appreciate any sort of comments, feedback, thumbs ups, anything you can give to help support me, and let me know if you enjoyed this video and if it was helpful. Thanks for watching.